Self-belief, in short, is thinking you can do something. Confidence is knowing you can. Now, I could say, right, I believe I can do a backflip, and I'll do it on camera for you right now. I have plenty of self-belief, and I could go set myself up and I could go and do it. The reality is I know I can't, but I have the belief. I'm like, you know what? I'll give it a go. And the confidence is knowing you can. So if someone said to me, okay, if you can do a backflip, I'll pay you $1,000, but if you don't do it, you've got to pay me $1,000. My self-belief wouldn't be able to maintain that. I wouldn't be able to maintain it because I know I can't do it. Whereas believing it is just a thought. Knowing it is a completely different thing. So it's important to know the difference. Self-belief is just a thought. You don't need permission, or you don't need any evidence that you can do something to have that self-belief. So that's just you just think you can do it. Confidence is knowing you can because of 3 elements. And you can't have 2 out of 3. You've got to have all 3 of these. And it doesn't matter which order, and it doesn't matter which 2. You need all 3. Consistent actions of what you want to improve your confidence on. Positive self-talk, internal and external. And a supportive community.
Welcome, everyone, back to the Sean Trey Show. I've got an awesome guest with me today, and I want you to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do.
Wow. Hello, everyone. My name's Luke Tyburski, and I'm an Aussie who lives in the UK, and I'm a keynote speaker and high-performance leadership coach in this lifetime.
That's awesome. How did you get into that? I mean, how does one go about becoming a high-performance mindset coach? How did you do that?
Yeah, so as I said, in this lifetime, I've had a couple of other previous iterations of my life at the moment. So I used to be a ultra endurance adventurer. So I traveled all around the world doing big, epic challenges, from running down Mount Everest, running across the Sahara desert, and even creating and completing a world first 2,000-kilometer triathlon from Morocco to Monaco. And I did that for about 12 years. And I was faced with some pretty tough challenges to overcome. And I started to apply those principles and sharing my stories on stage as a keynote speaker. So that's kind of where I got into the keynote speaking side of things. And the executive leadership performance coaching that I do was kind of like another iteration of that. I kind of wanted to explore other avenues rather than just telling a story and giving one immediate actionable takeaway on stage. I wanted to dive into and work with senior leadership teams, work with executives on a one-to-one coaching perspective. That's how I got into that. But where everything started was my first profession was a professional soccer player.
That's awesome. So, wow, that's a lot to unpack. I mean, I just the concept of like ultra endurance like sports, it blows me away. I was on the treadmill the other day, and I feel like I'm in pretty good shape. I've been on there for about 20 minutes, and I was getting ready to warm up for my Muay Thai class. But I was tired, man. And then I was sitting there thinking, and I looked down, and it was like 3 kilometers, and I was just like. And I just was thinking about people that run, these ultra marathons, and it's like 100-something kilometers, and you just keep going. Like, what type of mindset do you have to be able to do that?
One that's very fluid is probably the most succinct answer. And to add a bit of context to that is, look, people get into endurance sports for various different reasons. Some are running away literally from things. That's kind of how I got into it, and we can go down that route if you want to, whenever you like. And then other people just want to challenge themselves. They build up from a 5K, 10K, half marathon, and then they think, well, what if I can? What if I can run a little bit faster? So people who are curious about what they are capable of without putting restrictions, because it was only about 15, 20 years ago when the marathon throughout the general public was like this massive big thing that only people who dedicated their life to train to be able to accomplish. Now, it's still 42 kilometers or 26 miles, however you want to frame it. It's still a hell of a long way to run. However, I think as a society, we've realized that we can be a little bit more curious, because I think most people probably know someone who's ran a marathon. So they're kind of like,
Yeah.
well, I know Dave from down the street. He's never been an athlete and he's run a marathon. So if he can do it, why can't I? So there's a little bit of curiosity that comes into people doing a marathon, and then more people get curious to go even longer. So I think people who are curious, as well as have a fluid mindset, because you can't be fixed. You can't, because so many things go wrong when you're running for longer, over hours or even days or even weeks nonstop.
That's awesome. I love what you said there. What if I can? So often in our head, my daughter the other day was talking about her exam that was coming up, and again, this podcast started as just I was trying. Couldn't quite figure it out what I was doing with my Sean Trey show, but I finally figured it out at some point in time, and it's the kind of the frame of reference for two of my podcasts, my Growing Money podcast and this one. Both of them are referencing, me as a dad trying to figure out how to teach my daughter certain skills, certain things. And she was sitting there, and my Growing Money is like, I need to teach her about money because I had no idea. And I talked to all these financial professionals who can help me figure it out, which is an awesome podcast because I get to talk and meet all these great financial people, and I'm learning about money. But about life and things, I've had my experience, but there are times that she asks me questions and I don't have the answer. But one of the things that she asked me the other day was, what if I fail? I have an upcoming exam. What if I fail? What if I fail? What if I fail? And it's an interesting question because it's that, what if things go wrong? And I was like, well, highly likely, there's a high likelihood that, you're going to succeed. And she's like, well, she couldn't even frame it that way because it was very challenging for her because the fear of failure was much bigger than the possibility of success, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it really does. I think it happens a lot in society, not just with the next generation, but people who are already adults and well
Right.
into their lives. And look, one of the things that I speak about regularly is that self-belief isn't real. Like, it's a great tag. It's a great tagline, right? It gets people, exactly like you just said, nod your head to the side, intrigued. What are you talking about? Well, the reality is, self-belief is just a thought. So
Yeah.
you get to choose. You get to choose it, whether you want to have self-belief or not. And a lot of people believe that they need proof or permission to believe in themselves. And self-belief can exist without any evidence. So what I mean by that is, you don't need to have done something to have self-belief to do it. You don't need to you don't need to have permission because you're like, oh, well, I've done half a marathon, so that means I can do a marathon. If I don't run half a marathon, then there's no way I'll be able to do a full marathon. Life doesn't work like that. Self-belief is just a thought. So it can exist without evidence. And I think when people grasp that concept, that there's a difference between self-belief and confidence, and self-belief can just be magically thought up literally in your head because you don't need permission from any evidence that you've done this thing before. And there's a difference between confidence. Once people get their head around that, then they can start to talk to themselves differently and think differently. So then they can reduce that kind of like negative mindset of like, well, what if I do fail first, rather than what if I can actually achieve it?
I'm fascinated by some of the individual sports out there, things like the Olympics, Olympic gymnastics and things like that, because people, or ice skating or things like that, where people have a trick or a move that for a long time people go, you can't do that. That's not possible. You can't turn and spin that way. If you go back and look at like the pole, was it the pommel horse and also the vault, like from 100 years ago, and people and they just run down and they put their hands down and they pop over. And if you look at what people are doing now, like if you went back in time and said, okay, so you had one of the athletes, I'm going to run down, I'm going to do a backhand spring, and then I'm going to pop off and I'm going to spin about 7 times in the air and then spin this way and invert that way. people from 100 years ago would be like, that's impossible. You can't do that. But then they're like, well, I just did it. I just did it. It's impossible until someone does it,
Yeah, no, 100%. And it comes down to mindset. And my definition of mindset is how you view, think, and act. So to really quickly break that down is how you view yourself, how you view others, how you view the world will determine your thoughts. And then your thoughts and your internal conversations, as well as your cognitive bias, so from your culture or your background or what you've always done or the communities that you're in, they will dictate the options that you create for yourself based on the internal dialogue you have. So then how you view something and how you think about it will ultimately determine how you act, whether that's a physical or verbal action or doing nothing at all. So that's my definition of mindset when I mention that, how you view, think, and act. And it really does come down to people who are willing to train that on a daily basis. And athletes are fantastic at this because it is a big part of the sport, especially people who are elite and professional, because I know it is such a mental game, because the higher you go up, to use your example, gymnastics, the degree of difficulty for just doing those movements is very high, and they have to practice day in, day out for hours. So if they don't create self-belief by just simply walking onto the mats or walking onto the runway and going, I believe I can do this and I know I will, then they're already giving themselves a restriction. So it is training the mindset on a daily basis to help them be able to conjure up that self-belief in an instant and then work through their lives to actually then create something that's really powerful, which is different to self-belief, which is confidence.
Talk to me about that, because one of the things that when you look at self-belief and confidence, how are they different, and why is that even important to kind of recognize the difference between those two things?
Good question. Self-belief, in short, is thinking you can do something. Confidence is knowing you can. Now, I could say, right, I believe I can do a backflip, and I'll do it on camera for you right now. I have plenty of self-belief, and I could go set myself up and I could go and do it. The reality is I know I can't, but I have the belief. I'm like, you know what? I'll give it a go. And the confidence is knowing you can. So if someone said to me, okay, if you can do a backflip, I'll pay you $1,000, but if you don't do it, you've got to pay me $1,000. My self-belief wouldn't be able to maintain that. I wouldn't be able to maintain it because I know I can't do it. Whereas believing it is just a thought. Knowing it is a completely different thing. So it's important to know the difference. Self-belief is just a thought. You don't need permission, or you don't need any evidence that you can do something to have that self-belief. So that's just you just think you can do it. Confidence is knowing you can because of 3 elements. And you can't have 2 out of 3. You've got to have all 3 of these. And it doesn't matter which order, and it doesn't matter which 2. You need all 3. Consistent actions of what you want to improve your confidence on. Positive self-talk, internal and external. And a supportive community.
I love that.
They're the 3 things. You can't have 2 though. So I'll give you a really quick example of why you can't have 2. And it's one I give all the time, is that it's a child learning to ride a bike. And we can go all the way up to executive senior leadership teams. I've done this exercise with many people over the years, but a child learning to ride a bike is a really cool example. So if a child wants to be confident in riding a bike, they've got to ride a bike. They've got to have consistent actions. Get on every day on the bike and pedal, right? Learn how to do it. Failure, training wheels to start with, and then take the training wheels off. But they've got to do the consistent actions of riding the bike. Now, they also need a supportive community. So their parents are telling them, oh, well done, you pedaled for 10 times before you fell over this time. And, oh, you've only got 1 training wheel now instead of 2. You're doing great. So you've got a supportive community. The child also needs positive self-talk. So internally, whether it's conscious or not, depending on their age, but internally, they need to be saying, oh, I've nearly done this. I'm so close. Oh, I can do it. Yes, they will have some negative talk, but the positivity needs to override that. It needs to be more. So there can be internal positive self-talk, but also external, where they've got to actually say it out loud so they can hear it, because our minds process things different when we just think about it to when we say it out loud and we hear it. It changes how we hear it and how we process it. So they're the three elements. That's what the child needs to be confident. Now, here's the breakdown why 2 out of 3 isn't good enough. You need all 3 to develop confidence. So this child is getting on the bike every day and riding it. Their parents are really supportive. However, they are really negative and they tell themselves they can't ride a bike. They tell themselves they're going to be hopeless, and they tell themselves they can never ride the bike. This child will not develop confidence with that framework. Okay? So, variation 2, the child rides a bike every day and the child has so much positive self-talk, telling themselves, I'm going to be great, I'm going to be a perfect bike rider in the future, I'm working towards it, I'm going to get there, I'm doing fantastic, I'm going great. And even internally, oh, this is fantastic, I'm loving this, I pedaled 10 times now. But their parents, every time they come inside bouncing off the walls because they just started to ride a bike, their parents are telling them that they are hopeless. They're never going to be able to ride the bike. You're wasting your time. You're not going to be any good. That child's confidence is not going to grow in that environment. So variation number 3 is the child just thinks they're amazing. He says, oh, I'm a great bike rider. I'm fantastic. I'm the best bike rider in the world. I can ride the bike without training wheels. I'll never fall off. I'm fantastic. The parents are the same thing. Oh, you'll be a great bike rider. You're fantastic. You're amazing, but never rides the bike. So the parents tell them they're amazing. They tell themselves they're amazing, but never ride the bike. So the day that the child gets on to ride the bike, never ridden a bike before without training wheels, and they fall over and and they can't do it, that child's self-belief is going to fracture and not be able to build the confidence until they do the consistent actions. So confidence is knowing you can do the thing you want to do because you've done consistent actions in what it is. You've got positive self-talk, internal and external, and a supportive community.
I love that. While you were talking to me about that, I remembered my early experiences trying to learn to ride a bike. And luckily, I had all 3. I remember I had, a very supportive mom. I had supportive self-talk. I was like, I can do this. I think I can do this. I believe I can do this. And then, I got the reps in going down this hill behind my house. Just, each time getting the reps in. And I love how you talk about you need the reps. I saw this one video online, and I train Muay Thai, and I take my daughter. We go to Muay Thai every 3 days a week, and we learn because I want her to be able to learn to defend herself and take care of herself. And we have a great community, and I support her in that. And she, is getting her self-talk. So I love it. But, it's like the other day she's like, I could beat up a grown man. And I was like, yeah, you need to just get in there and practice your punches. And she was like, I think if that guy, because this one person was trying to bully someone, and we saw it. And I was like, I stepped up and I said something to him. I said, please don't do that. And she's like, I wish I had been able to say something. I said, let's wait on that. And it wasn't that I didn't want to like pop her balloon there, or burst her bubble. But like, I was like, what you need to do is you just need to keep showing up. You need to keep going to the gym. You need to keep being in there. And I said, eventually you'll get, I believe at some point in time, you will be able to defend yourself or someone else, but right now, let's just work on keeping our hands up, like that's literally what you need to do right now. And it's fun like that because, one of the things that I noticed was that there was, she gets there, there's also something else. And I had seen, you had mentioned this in our conversation slightly before we came on, was about staying present and the ability to stay present in things. Because one of the things that I notice is when I get into the negative self-talk, when I get into the, start going down that path, it's almost this it's a combination of like being out of the present. I'm hypothesizing and thinking about catastrophizing, and also, and then this level of sabotage starts to sneak in, And so one of the things I do is just constantly try to bring myself back to the present. Like, I've got this checklist of everything I need to get done for the day. But then I was starting to read this book about the one thing. What's the one thing I can do next? What's the one thing that's going to move the needle next? And then just focusing on that. I got to get this done. And the next hour, I have to get this done. And it helps me, because otherwise I just start going down this path that can be really challenging sometimes,
Yeah. And I talk about that the formula for success is the ability to be present, the ability to be present for longer, and the ability to refocus if you get distracted, to pull yourself back into being in the present moment. Because if you can't be present, then how you expect to be able to work as hard as you can because you'll be distracted? How do you expect to be focused? Because there won't be that focus on being in the present moment if you're future thinking rather than present thinking on what you're actually doing. So being present, I think, is the formula to success, and having the ability to pull yourself back into the present moment and acknowledge when you have been distracted. And that is a very, very powerful tool. It's a hell of a lot easier to say than it is to do. But there's so many things that we can do, and a big part of it is actually stopping everything that is an input. So absorbing things, like listening to things. I always make sure I spend time in my day where there is no input. So I'm not listening, I'm not looking, I'm not writing, I'm not journaling. I do all these things, all mindfulness techniques. But there'll be times where I'm just like, let's just be still. And people are like, well, that's a luxury. Some days I will set a timer on my phone for like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, and just be like, okay, I'm just going to sit here, and I've got a timer on, and I'm just going to be still. But I'm carving out a period of time every day to do that. Sometimes it's 10 minutes, and I'm just still. I'm not trying to absorb anything. I'm not trying to put anything out. I'm just trying to be present in that moment. Maybe I focus on my breath. Maybe I let my thoughts come and go, a little bit more sort of like easy sort of meditation. But sometimes I just sit there, and if I think of something, I let it come, I let it go. If I do, maybe I pull on that. But I just be there. But people think, well, how is that going to help me be present when I'm in a meeting and I'm in the office and it's all really busy? Well, it's like anything that you train.
Yeah.
It takes time. And the more that you can train to just be, then the quicker you'll be able to realize you're being distracted. And then there's also the whole other thing where I've done, and I still do in my office, I put a sticky note of a word or a phrase or a cue to remind me to be present. And
I love that.
That is a really, really simple way. It might say be present. I've got one at the moment that says, what are you doing? So when I look at that, I go, what am I doing? I'm like, well, actually, I'm being distracted here. I'm scrolling through social media when I'm supposed to be focusing on something. It brings me back to the present moment. And a lot of the times it's like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, no, I'm doing the right thing. And I'll literally give myself a pat on the back because I am focused. And it's like, cool, reinforcing that and carrying on. So there's a few little tips of how I stay present.
I love my one of my meditation teachers would pick a color for the day. And he's like, every time I see that color, I'm just kind of coming back to my present moment. When I first moved to Southeast Asia in Vietnam, it was a long time ago, 2001, pre-social media, and it was a time that things were slower. And one of the things that I remember is when I first came to Vietnam, it was a much slower place. Now it's super fast, everything fast. It's wild. But I remember when I came to my first hotel in Vietnam, and there was a gentleman, he was a really old guy, had to be in his 80s, maybe 90s. And at the beginning of the day, I would go out to work, and he would be sitting there in his chair. And I'd come home at around 9 p.m. at night, and he was still sitting in the same chair. He just was sitting in at peace. And I would ask the people at my my hotel. I was like, what does he do? He's like, oh, he just lives there. And I was like, what does he do all day? And they're like, he sits there and he watches and he listens. He'll have a cup of tea and then he'll have some water and he just sits and listens. And it was so foreign for me, because I was like, we must be doing something. Like, our whole lives focus around the doing. And yet I was like, then one day I was like, all right, I want to try this. I'm going to try just being, not doing, but being. And it was this, first of all, I'm going to say it made me a little bit crazy at first, because I was like, my brain was like, I need to do. But I found a profound sense of peace when I got to a certain point. And one of the places that I find that I really, I can get to that space more easily, and it's wild that it's just what helps me, is the sauna. When I get into a sauna, I don't feel like I need to be doing anything. It's the one place I'm just like, or a hot, like a warm bath, and I'm just like, just need to be here, just need to be present. So whatever tools you need, man.
Yeah, 100%. Whatever works for you, and it is a case of that. You've got to explore what does resonate with you and what allows you to just be still. And I think the biggest thing for a lot of people in this day and age, especially in the Western world, is giving yourself permission to just not do anything.
Yeah,
whether that's for 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, or for a couple of hours on a weekend, give yourself permission to not do anything, and that's okay. And the other thing as well is acknowledging that you can have, if you're really tired from a busy week of work, I just want to lay on the couch. Right, okay, I heard Luke on this podcast and he said, just chill out, just be for an hour. And if you're laying on the couch, chilled out, with music on and your phone in your hand and you're scrolling through social media, you're not being. Because you're trying to absorb music and you're focusing on social media. Like, being is literally just laying on the couch, not with the television on, not with any music on, just laying there. And it will feel really uncomfortable. It'll feel really jarring the first time you do it if you're not used to it. Maybe don't do an hour. Maybe like, okay, I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes on my phone,
right.
Put it on the other side of the lounge room so I can't grab it, and I'm just going to lay on the couch and just be aware of how I feel, aware of the thoughts that come, aware of any physical feelings, emotional feelings, or even mental sort of impact that laying down has on you. And that comes over time, a way of developing your self-awareness to just being still. And then when you have that self-awareness, that's where I talk about the formula to success, is the ability to bring yourself back into the present moment. So the higher self-awareness you have, the higher the ability that you can catch yourself if you are being distracted and pull yourself back to the present moment.
I love that. Now, if someone they find themselves constantly being pulled away from the present moment, what are some practical things they can do to help kind of start to bring themselves back to it?
Yeah, as I said, like, you can create cues.
I like that one.
That can be words, even colors, as you said, but a visual cue, something that you see. So that's why I say a sticky note on the corner of your laptop or next to the keyboards on your laptop or something like that. A visual cue. It could be a screensaver on your phone, something like that. It could be removing all notifications on your phone and putting all your social media apps or the apps that distract you and get you away from being in the present moment in a folder. You have to scroll several times to get there and call it distraction. So there's more friction points to get to there. So it gives you a more of a period of time, and you have to do more work to get to those social media apps as it's distracting you. So visual cues or even audio cues as well. So you can set an alarm for every 45 minutes and it'll go off, and you can check in. How's my last 45 minutes been? I've actually been really, really productive. Okay, what did I do well? I did this. Okay, cool. And the other thing is this: some people find this counterintuitive at first, is take regular breaks.
Yes.
Take regular breaks, because we struggle to stay focused for I don't know what the exact science says, but there's a lot of things out there that's saying like 20 minutes, 45 minutes, like it's not hours or even an hour. We get distracted before the hour mark, but it's that period of time where we do really deep focus work for like, let's just call it 30 to 40 minutes and then take a break. And that might be really simple as I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk around the house. Or if you live in an apartment, I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk down to the bottom floor, down the stairs, and then walk back up, or walk down 2 sets of stairs and walk back up. Go and walk around your garden. Go and do something to break it up and then come back.
I agree. It's interesting because there is this there's a combination of a couple things. Some people, I also find that there's a lot of procrastination that comes into a lot of this. People go, you know what? I agree with all of this, but I'm just too busy. I've heard so many people talk about how busy they were to slow down. There was a Vietnamese Zen Buddhist monk named Thich Nhat Hanh, and he was doing this lecture with someone, and he was giving them some pieces of a peach. And the person was just munching down on these peaches, eating them so quickly and asking Thich Nhat Hanh all these questions. Like, teach me about this. Tell me about this. And then he was like, you're not enjoying the peach that I'm giving you. Slow down and eat the peach. I had years where I couldn't eat certain foods because I developed some food allergies. And then slowly, for some reason that I'm very happy about, my food allergies started abating. And I was able to add back in certain foods. Now, do you know what it's like eating a pomegranate after not being able to eat it for 20 years? I do. And when you have that pomegranate for the first time, and it touches your mouth and you go, it's just magic. Like, it's like something you can't even imagine. That is that mindfulness that I wish that everyone had, but we're so used to. What if I told you that today was the last time that you would ever be able to eat a pizza? And then for the next 40 years, you're not going to be able to have a pizza again, or whatever is your favorite food. How would you enjoy that pizza? But because life is the same thing, we think that we have eons of time left, but you have a limited number of sunrises. You have a limited number of, my daughter ran up behind me and gave me a hug as I was walking yesterday. And I was busy and stressed and I had some things to do and I almost pulled away. But then I was like, she's 9 years old. In a couple years, she's going to be hitting that teenager and I'm going to be the last person that she wants to hang out with or spend time with. I'm going to appreciate that. So I stopped and I turned around and I gave her a big hug. And it was lovely. It was beautiful because I was able to sit there and frame it correctly, because I try to remind myself, like that amor fati from the Stoics. If you frame everything as we have a finite amount of time, you start appreciating things more.
Yeah, and something that I live by, and I've delivered a keynote talk on this many, many times around the world, is make choices, never sacrifices. And I've worked with many Olympians over the years, and the mindset that we get into is, and the Olympics is a really interesting thing, because for a lot of these sports, the main competition is only every 4 years. So these individuals are dedicating large chunks of their lives to be at their best on a day in 4 years' time, 3 years' time, 2 years' time, and 12 months' time. And that's a really interesting concept, because they have to dedicate large chunks of their life. So I worked with an Olympian who was going into their third Olympics. So this is 12 years. And they said to me, I think this is going to be my last Olympics because I'm sick of sacrificing my life. And I said, right, I need you to remove that word from your vocabulary if you want a chance of winning a medal at this next Olympics. We need you to reframe that. Because what do you mean? It is, I've sacrificed 12 years of my life to go to these 3 Olympics. And I was like, no, you haven't. You've made a choice. You've made a choice to be a professional athlete. You've made a choice to get up every day. And when it comes down to it, do I go out and party with my friends, or do I get up at really early in the morning and go and train? You choose to do that based on your values, your objectives, and what you want to accomplish in your life. It's a choice. And then that gives us a mindset of abundance, because then you're attaching yourself to that as, it's in my power. I'm making this choice. I'm taking control of my life. When we say I make sacrifices, and I'm talking about the smallest little things in life to, someone wanting to be a 3-time Olympian. When we say we make sacrifices, sacrifice means we're going without. So that means we're doing something where actually we might want to do something else. So why aren't we doing that? We live once, as far as I know, and we do have a finite amount of time and energy and effort, and for pretty much everyone on the planet, finite amount of money as well. So when we spend our time, effort, energy, and money, we want to make sure we're doing what we want to do and understand why we're doing it. So when we say we sacrifice things, it puts a negative connotation on it, and it makes it feel like that we're doing something that we don't want to do, and there's something else that we would rather do, or something better. Now, then that can have a negative filter effect into your daily life and to how you view what you're doing. So what I ask people is to take not one step back, but a big 5 metaphorical steps back and go, okay, what do I want to achieve in my life? What are my values? And how do I want to accomplish these? So when you wake up in the morning and you go, what am I going to do today? How am I going to spend my limited amount of time, energy, effort, and money? You've got your values that guide you. You've got your objectives or your goals in life. And then you go and do that. And when it comes to a difficult, what may seem as a difficult decision to make, if you understand your values and even create your own life philosophy, a guiding set of words or sentences or phrases to guide you on your daily life, when you live that life philosophy, then I'm choosing to do this rather than sacrificing it. And that is a major, major, major mindset shift for people to acknowledge that I am actually choosing to do this. It's in my control. I'm focusing on aligning my limited amount of time, effort, energy, and money to doing the things that I want to accomplish that aligns with my values and my objectives in life.
It's a choice, and I think that that's one of the most powerful things people can realize, is that we do have that choice. There is always something that you can do to change your situation. And number one, which leads me to ask you a question. If someone is feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or just lacking direction, what's one of the first choices they need to make to start moving in the right direction again?
I would get them to ask themselves, where do they feel in life? When's a time in life where they feel their best authentic self? Like, what are they doing? Who are they with? Where they feel most authentic, where they feel like their true self. And then go back from there. Like, why do they feel that great when they're with these people or when they're doing that thing? And then try and understand, okay, well, if I feel like that when I do this, how can I implement that into my life more often? Because mood follows action. So if we can start doing things, and like, I get it, like not everyone can do whatever they want at any time. But if you can spend your weekends doing something, if you work a 9 to 5, you can spend your weekends doing something really nourishing and really fills your cup up, then if you're not doing something exactly what you want to be doing right now for Monday to Friday, you've got those weekends. That's a start. However, I would then say, okay, dig a little bit deeper to go, I mentioned this before, like, what's your life philosophy? Like, how do you live your life? And I first heard this concept by Coach Pete Carroll. He used to be coach of the Seattle Seahawks when they won the Super Bowl, American football. And he was talking to Dr. Michael Gervais, talking about his personal philosophy, a guiding set of words or sentence to guide him. And he would get his players to do every season, whether they're new or whether they're existing players. It's like, I think he used to say that you've got 30 words to create your personal philosophy. And I thought, this is a great exercise. I'm going to do that. That sounds easy. 30 words, loads. So I was like, okay, how do you want to live your life? Not your professional life, not just your personal life, not just hobbies, but your life. Everything you do, what's a guiding set of principles or words or phrases? Anyway, I set out to do this exercise, 30 words or left. 3 pages later, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is so much more difficult. So I've been able to get it down now to basically 3 bullet points.
Okay.
Be curious.
Okay.
Build new and nourish existing relationships, and share with others what life has taught me.
Oh,
now,
I love that.
Everything I do in my life, whenever it comes to my limited amount of energy or money or time or effort, a lot of it's, I don't have to think about it. But if I'm like, oh, should I do that or not? I take a step back and go, does it align with my life philosophy? If it does, okay, then it's an option to do. I can choose to do it if that's what I want. If it doesn't align with that, then I'm not going to do it. I'm very happy to say no. So I've got a metaphorical North Star, how I spend my time and effort and energy. I know what I want to do in life. I know how I want to accomplish that by having this life philosophy of be curious in everything that I do, build new and nourish existing relationships, and share with others what life has taught me. So that's what I do as a profession. When I'm with friends, I'm nourishing those relationships, and then I'm curious in everything. I don't judge. It's kind of like, well, why did people do that? And I ask them. That's an interesting way of doing it. I've never seen it like that. So I live that in everything I do, and I think it'd be really helpful for people to do that exercise, to try and understand what their own life philosophy is.
I love that. If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what advice would you give yourself?
I've been asked this a few times over the years, and if I could go back and tell younger Luke anything, it would just be do what you think you should do. Yeah, I've been asked this before, and I've tried to come up with some sort of advice, and I've lived a life where I've been curious and I've not conformed to the very stereotypical society's kind of like laws. So I also do a keynote talk called Eating Salad for Breakfast. And it's got nothing to do with food. But what it is it's a concept of living by society's laws, but not its rules. Because in the world that we live in, every culture has, every country, we have these rules that you should abide by, right? It's the basic one is you go to school, you get an education, you go to university, you meet someone, you buy a house, you have a family, blah blah blah. Like that's dated, but that sort of concept, that is a society rule. Yeah. And I grew up wanting to be a professional soccer player in Australia, where there wasn't even a professional league when I grew up. And I grew up in a small country town 3.5 hours away from Sydney. And everyone was kind of like, okay, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to England and play. And they're like, who do you know in England? I'm like, no one. But I believe I can do it. So curiosity has always been something inside me, but I've lived by this concept of eating salad for breakfast and not abiding by society's rules. And I've really tried to think about what advice I'd give my younger self. And it's just kind of like, dude, like, do what you think's right. Because I can look back now in my life, I've made mistakes. I could have done things differently. However, overall advice, just be like, go after it. Be curious, chase your goals, and know that you make certain choices that are going to be really difficult, but you'll learn to build the resilience that you have done because you've fallen over 9 times out of 10. But that one time that you don't fall over and you succeed and you achieve, it's well worth the lessons you learn from those 9 times you fall over.
I love that. Well, where can people go to find out more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, you can. I'm pretty easy to find online. Just Luke Tyburski. You can Google me, or you can go to luketyburski.com. A lot of my executive coaching and keynote speaking information is on LinkedIn. You can search TEDx. I did a TEDx talk a couple of years ago about being less negative. So when I'll give you a really quick, and this actually is something that you mentioned about with your daughter. This is a framework that she could use. Is that we get hit with setbacks. Everyone does, right? And sometimes we can brush it off and be like, yeah, okay, we're going to be positive, because we know negativity doesn't help us, whether we say it out loud or whether we think it. We know that from a neuroscience perspective and psychology perspective, it doesn't help. However, not every situation, scenario, or outcome that happens to you, you can just brush off. And you can be like, no, I'm going to be positive, like the death of a loved one. It's really difficult to be like, the day of that person passes, to be super positive. You're like, oh, but what about all the great times we had with them? It's too raw. It's too difficult.
Yeah.
So, but we know being negative doesn't help. So being less negative is what I did my TED talk on. And it's a really simple framework. And it goes like this. What happened? How did it happen? And where do I now need to focus in order to move forwards?
Oh.
So you're not being super overly confident and positive with loads of self-belief. It's just kind of like, okay, life has just punched me in the face. What actually happened? Like, actually, what was the mechanisms that happened? Or for your daughter, if she's future thinking it, okay, what could happen? What could happen? Okay, how could that happen? Well, this could happen. Okay, well, how could that happen? All right, so if that or that could happen, where would you need to focus in order to move past that? So whether it's future-proofing it, for the example that your daughter said earlier about what if she failed, okay, what could happen? How could it happen? And where would you need to focus in order to move past it? But for the present moment, when something has already happened to you and life is just, pushing you down, take a breath and ask yourself, what actually did happen? How did it happen? So you can learn the mechanisms. So you learn, so you don't put yourself in a position that it could happen again, if possible. So what happened? How did it happen? And then to give yourself something to focus on. Where do I now need to focus in order to move forward? Not overcome, not accomplish, not be the champion and win, but just move forward a little bit. That is the framework of how to be less negative.